How's it going, everybody? This podcast is brought to you by Rise Make Life Workout, a health, self-development and lifestyle platform building a passionate community of knowledge seekers, creative dreamers and future leaders.
For details on the latest Rise event that will feature expert speakers in the field of self-development and growth, check out www.rise-workout.com.
That's www.rise-workout.com. Enjoy the show.
Welcome back to another episode of Rise Optimise, where we make science simple to help you optimise your health. My name's Shanae, and today I'm joined by Ben Te Maro.
Kia ora.
Hello. Ben, for those out there that may not know you, do you want to give a quick little intro as to your background and what you do?
So I'm Ben. I'm an occupational therapist by background, and I predominantly work. I have many roles, but I predominantly work in suicide postvention and prevention. So that's my main role in mental health as an occupational therapist. But I also work at Les Mills as a instructor, and I also work at the University of Auckland in the Department of Psychological Medicine.
You're a busy fella.
Yes, too many jobs.
And I guess based on Ben's intro, you can gather that today's area is on optimising your mental health. And the topic we're going to be covering is the importance of belonging. So how did you sort of come to this topic?
Well, I think personally for me, people who know me will know that I've had my experiences with social anxiety. So as a teenager, I had a lot of difficulties with that. And then as an adult, it still comes up, but probably less so. And I found ways to sort of cope with it. But what's been really interesting lately is having the number of lockdowns in Auckland that we have had. And it's, I guess, posed identity crises for me multiple different times. And I know that I'm not the only person in this, because, you know, I hear from talking to people or seeing on social media or even just seeing the evidence about how many people are changing jobs, that these lockdowns have been a period of reflection for everybody. And I suppose that when those sorts of things have been triggered by kind of a crisis, like the only reason why you might be reflecting is because you've got time to reflect. It's made me wonder about how do you make those decisions about stepping outside of your comfort zone. And I know from my experience of having social phobia that it's much easier to make choices that seem scary when you are being authentic to yourself. And I also know that it's easier to be authentic to yourself if you have a sense of social belonging. And so, you know, I just had these observations where, particularly like people who might be in the creative arts, who were putting themselves out there on social media, I really enjoyed watching what they were doing, because they were like trying to make a living in an environment where everything had sort of shut down. And so they were coming up with these kind of cool, you know, skits or like these things just to keep their creative juices going. And I was like, actually, they're delivering on a platform that they probably would never have put themselves out on before. But being a creative is so essential to their being that they're willing to do that, because that helps them feel like they belong on this planet. And I couldn't imagine how scary it is to have everything shut down and so your career is completely wiped out. Where there's other people where I've kind of watched, this is no shade or criticism really, but I have wondered whether or not there's more of a hustle behind their decision making and how they've tried to present themselves. And I can't help but have the feeling that it may not necessarily be connected to what they want for themselves, but more so about how to seek approval from others. And I guess what I know from the research is that the more that you try to fit in, the less you belong. And the more authentic you are, the more sense of belonging you have, even if that means that you're not necessarily socializing in all these big open spaces and that you might have small cliques that you belong to.
So yeah, there's quite a difference there between fitting in versus belonging, in that fitting in, you're still sort of changing yourself to try and make yourself belong, when, like you said, because you're having to either hide something or you're not being fully authentic, you're not going to feel that same sense of belonging if you were 100% yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, like the current thing for me that I had been reflecting upon, you know, in terms of my journey with my own social phobia, is about how much as an adult I don't care about the things that probably would have scared me as a child. And I do have a better sense of my sense of belonging than I did. If you were to think about teenagers anyway, that whole life stage is about fitting in as an adolescent and trying to do what your peers are. And I mean, what we know from research is that humans are communal animals, that we're meant to live in packs, that we're not meant to live alone, and we are pre-wired to experience anxiety when we step away and try to be individualistic, particularly when we're being banished, for lack of a better word, from our tribe. That sends, this neurological impulse to reconnect with our tribe and make right. And that's why we apologize. When we do something wrong, that's the pre-wiring to make right, to ease social relationships. And so I thinking about my childhood and, what was going on for me, like apart from all the other things I think, that teenagers go through about trying to be cool and wanting approval, at that time I was a Māori kid in a predominantly white school. And also I was trying to figure out, still probably am, trying to figure out my sexuality. And, currently as an adult, I'm much clearer about who I am as a Māori. And I'm in a same-sex relationship, and many people know that about me now. And so there's a confidence that I have that the people who are still with me still love and appreciate me for who I am, that I didn't necessarily have when I was younger and growing up.
Yeah, so it sounds like in knowing sort of who you are, it is definitely something that would develop over time. Like you said, for a lot of us going through adolescence, it is sort of trying to work out who you are, but at the same time you are just more so trying to fit in. But I guess you would assume then once we're maybe into our sort of late 20s, getting into our 30s is where people are a bit more, I kind of know who I am, I know my tribe or my kind of people that I want to surround myself with.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite a journey when you think about it developmentally, right? So you start off as a child and you're really only exposed to your family and your school and what you may learn in your little pocket of that community or your small town that you might be born in. Then you go and you're a teenager and you're exposed to world issues a lot more. But essentially the drive is to be the same as everybody else at that developmental stage. Ironically, we charge teenagers with this ability to choose what they want to do for the rest of their life with kind of almost limiting their life experiences. And so I think that's why a lot of people have that panic around what am I going to do at the end of high school, is because actually, in fairness, they've been primed to try and do what everyone thinks is cool or to seek that approval for lack of a better word, but they also have limited life experience and they're still trying to figure out who they are, and yet we're like, go do this thing with your life. And so you jump into uni or a job thinking that that's what you want to do, and for many of us that works out for us, and for other people they may have to do that for a little while before realizing actually that's not what they're all about. Also, I think the other thing that happens in our 20s is that we get into romantic relationships and deeper friendships, more meaningful friendships, and I think through that excavation of being so intimate with other humans that we start to realize what we like and what we don't like. And so we do go through a bit more of a process in our 20s of figuring out who we are. But all through that process, there is this kind of battle of, do I do what I need to do to fit in, or do I start being myself? So it's like that talk that I was having with you earlier around career choices. I was saying to Shanae that being an occupational therapist has actually been quite a blessing in some ways as a career choice, because unfortunately I'm laughing because no one really knows what an occupational therapist is or what we do. And I guess in the big scheme of the hierarchy of the health system, I don't think occupational therapists are anywhere near the top. And I think a lot of occupational therapists out there would also agree, sadly. But there's actually some good stuff behind that, in that when I was making that choice, I guess I made that choice on the basis that I thought the career would align with who I am and my values. And my values are very much around caring, looking after other people, being kind, being supportive. And I looked at that job description and I was like, yeah, I could really activate those values through the work that I do. But I've also worked with physios and I've also worked with psychologists who have a vision of what that means. And, you know, I want to be a physio for the All Blacks, or I want to be a criminal psychologist because I watched Silence of the Lambs. And sometimes they get into the job and then they have this like identity crisis because what they thought they were doing or what they thought the job was about isn't living up to their expectations, and potentially that's because there's a mismatch between their values as a person and what the job actually entails. And potentially they chose those jobs because of social approval, wanting to fit in with others. You know, when you say I want to be a psychologist, no one ever says that's a bad choice. You know, people really admire physios, and so no one's going to tell you that not to do that. But if you were to say I'm going to be a lorry truck driver, people might say, are you sure you want to do that for a living? And so it's really much easier to be more authentic and feel like you fit in when you make a choice based on what works for you rather than what works for others. Because I guess here's the thing that we know from the data around the sense of belonging is that you can change who you are to fit in with other people, but that will only increase your sense of insecurity and the sense that you don't belong. So, you know, like just to unpack that, the more that we fake it to fit in with other people, the more that they actually might like us. That might be true. Yeah. But we're feeling like we're like living this lie, that we're being disingenuous in some way. And so although we might have the relationship that we were hoping for, we don't feel like we should be there.
There'd still be maybe and a part of you as well that feels that you might get caught out one day, or that you know, that sort of some imposter that people will find out the true me and maybe not like me, and then I'll be banished from the group. Yeah, exactly.
And you know, like as a very obvious example, you know, talking about, you know, my sexuality, you know, like I was petrified that like if I ever came out that, you know, people would not like me. And it's also been like quite an interesting thing because actually that hasn't really been the experience. You know, I don't think that anyone who really has wanted to be my friend or is my family member cares about who I share my bed with. Like they actually care about who I am and whether I'm happy. And that's been quite affirming in terms of my sense of belonging because, you know, I felt like I was holding this big secret for years and then suddenly I'm like, oh, yeah.
And does that sort of link into, again, our attachment to those things? Like if we have a strong attachment to our sexuality, or we feel that that's a big part of us, that we think others are going to therefore be, you know, affected by that, when at the end of the day they still just appreciate for us as a whole, as a person, that's maybe, or same our career choice or something like that, that we may hold up as a pedestal being a big part of us or a big thing, and therefore like without that job, what will people think of me?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that like that, I mean, here's the kicker about social relationships. I mean, I don't know anyone who's ever said to me, hey Ben, what do you think? Like if I stopped being a physio, what would you think of me? You know, like we don't check the facts about these things.
But we keep that story going in our head.
And that story is what dictates our behaviour, which I think is the thing that we need to be mindful of really at the end of the day, because the stories that we tell ourselves are really powerful. They may not be true. And I guess at the end of the day, if we're thinking about happiness and belonging, sometimes it's better to know that people don't like you or people don't appreciate your choices, because when that happens, then you find the places that you do belong or the people who you do belong with. You know, we're not really good, as I just said, in terms of checking the facts. And so sometimes we can be hustling for years trying to keep this illusion of this person that we think people want us to be, and then that can be all for nothing, or all for a person that makes you feel miserable. You know, like I do know, you know, because of my work in mental health, about people who have changed who they are for somebody for so long, and then that relationship comes to an end and they've just been gutted that they've kind of, for lack of a better word, wasted a period of their life trying to be something that they weren't happy with. And I guess the thing that we probably won't have time to touch on, because it's a whole different subject about itself, is having the bravery, I guess, to be authentic to yourself. But I guess where I thought that this conversation was interesting was actually to have a reflective pause, for lack of a better word. So that we can understand, why are we doing the things that we do? I'm really interested in that, you know, unpacking the why.
Yeah, and like you said, sort of the lockdowns and things have provided people with a lot more time and less distractions to really sort of stop and reflect on, who am I without being busy at work or being at the gym or being out with my friends, and who am I, what am I about, and what do I want to do?
Yeah, and so I guess, reflecting upon lockdowns and how that sort of affected me, I'm really super glad that actually I was working, because I think that I would have had a bigger identity crisis if I wasn't able to work, because I get a lot of confirmation that I'm doing what I think I was meant to do by doing the work that I do, which is interesting, because I think on the one hand, I shouldn't need a job to confirm who I am. I should just know that instinctively. And I do know that I care, and, I've devoted half my life to working in healthcare. So I do know that, caring and looking after people is essentially a big part of who I am. But if I was to stop that, and I've had experiences of going on long holidays and needing to tell people that I work in healthcare, and talk about my job, and they're on holiday and they're like, the last thing I want to talk about is my job. And I feel like I need to, because I need to explain that that's who I am as a person. And actually, to be fair, my career only enables me to enact my values. And I could enact those values in many different ways, like it'd be a stretch, but I could probably be an accountant and show caring. And it feels a little bit of chalk and cheese, but I suppose if I thought about accounting as helping other people with their finances, then potentially I could see that I'm enacting caring in that role.
Yeah, and helping others. Yeah, it is interesting that a lot of the times it's our go-to when we introduce ourselves or something, is that saying our profession or something like that, when like you said, maybe it is a way, because it's our job, if it's aligned and linked with our values, we may feel it's a similar way to express by saying I'm an OT, I'm a physio. We hope that we're portraying to people that, like, I'm a caring person and I look after others, when really we could be saying those things without necessarily needing to add our job title in there. We could just be like, oh, I'm Shanae and I enjoy helping people and bettering their health and educating people on their body.
Yeah, absolutely. And and also we need to think about, is the pressure behind that because we want some currency about sharing our status with other people? Because I guess that would be the other reason why you would share, is like, look at me, I'm an occupational therapist and I do this important work. I really, really try not to tell people that I work in suicide, because people have this assumption about what a great human being I am. And that's nice, and I don't think I'm a bad human being at all. But it's their perception of what the role is, not what the role is. I could still be an a-hole.
But he's not.
Well, I hope I'm not. But, it's that currency that people then give you, and I feel really uncomfortable with that currency that people get, because I feel like they see me as some sort of angelic person, and I'm like, that's your social currency that you're giving to me. I don't think that I've earned that, because that's a perception of what I do rather than the facts about what I do.
Yeah, interesting.
And so I guess my where I'm at in life, again, and I'm talking about myself because I'm hoping that listeners out there are also kind of thinking about how this might apply to themselves. Where I'm at life is really making sure that when I am doing stuff, that I am doing stuff that really is meaningful to me, and not just doing it because of the social currency that I'm talking about. Because I do think that sometimes we end up doing a whole bunch of things for the approval of others. How many times that you've stretched your weekend to go to 5 different social events, and actually that led to your burnout, but no one knows about that because they weren't at all 5 events that you also attended. And if people knew that you were working so hard for their approval, would they just say chill? You don't have to do that. And so I'm really clear right now that people can expect things of me, but I also need to be really clear with them about what I'm willing to do. So for example, I was talking to Shanae about this earlier, that in terms of my group fitness classes, with my 6 a.m. classes, sometimes I don't do my hair. Luckily I've cut my hair recently, so it's really short. But being a group fitness instructor, part of that criteria is not he has really cool hair. And what the criteria actually is can they throw down the choreography to the beat and give a good, pleasurable experience of that. And I think I can do that regardless of what my hair looks like. I understand why people would want me to have nice, clean hair. By the end of the class, I don't have nice, clean hair anyway. So for me, I'm not actually willing to sacrifice stuff about myself for the approval of others. And because naturally as a person, I don't really care too much about how I appear to others. And like my physical appearance is something that I don't naturally care about. And so I will get called in to do presentations at different universities about stuff. And I'm like, cool, but I'm going to show up in a shorts and t-shirt because I'm not going to wear a suit and tie and be uncomfortable. And you know, like, that's just not something that I'm willing to do. I understand why you want that, but and if you want that, ask somebody else.
Yeah, because that's not me, and you would be not being your authentic self type thing, and also that would lead to your feeling of not feeling like you belong in that place or that situation. Yeah,
and I think the interesting thing is, because I think sometimes when we talk about this stuff and people are like, well, that's, you know, you're lucky you have a privilege, and I don't want to kind of ignore the privileges that I do have. However, I've talked to many different people in many different walks of life that do many different things, and I notice that when they are being themselves, they might lose out on opportunities. But they find a whole bunch more opportunities in the things that they're really interested in. And I think that's the really unique thing around, you know, personal goal development, being where you want to be and being truly happy with wherever you are in life, is that having the bravery to go, here's an opportunity. When I look at this opportunity, it sounds like I would have to change a whole bunch of things about myself. Actually, I'm going to close that door on that opportunity and walk away from it. I think it takes a lot of bravery to do that. And ultimately, if you're playing by your guns, another door will open because people will understand what you're all about. I think there's another part, which I guess we're not talking about today, which is around signaling to the world who you are. Like, it's one thing for you to know who you are. I think sometimes we have to signal that to others. Because once other people know, they're like, oh, you know, that's Shanae. Shanae's so quite confident and preaching the good word about all things health. So actually, that's the type of person that we want to be having as a guest speaker on our panel, you know. But if you keep that to yourself, no one's going to know that.
Yeah, very interesting. So what do you feel maybe would be, I guess, in regards to people sort of working out who they are, what do you feel is probably the biggest thing in regards to sort of finding that authenticity and being able to sort of cultivate that bravery to really be like, this is me, and either this is for me or this environment or this situation is not for me?
I think there's multiple ways through that. Things like journaling and stuff like that, because I think we can get some sense of, because journaling will be a place where you're most vulnerable and honest. That might be a place where you pick up themes. Might sound naff, something as practical though as value cards. And you know, or like a values website even, and just going through them and thinking, actually, is that one for me? Would I value that higher? It's stuff that I do with teenagers all the time when I'm helping them with career choices. Is, you know, I get them to look at a whole bunch of values and get them to order them about what's most important and to see whether that fits with their choices that they're about to make for their future. You could ask people, though in saying that, that's about being curious about whether or not how other people see you fits with how you see yourself, and not necessarily letting their opinions dominate what you think of yourself. Because sometimes you need someone to tell you who you're not to go, actually, I'm not that person. So I mean, that's another way that they can find out. The thing that I do, and it might be just a unique Ben thing, is that I try to remember like 7-year-old me. Because I swear that I had a better sense of what I wanted for myself and who I was when I was 7. You know, I think I was probably more courageous and more bold. And even though all the things that I wanted to be were probably unrealistic, you know, like I wanted to be a superhero. Like the fact that I know that I used to want to be a superhero as a child, it doesn't surprise me that I worked in healthcare. Because, you know, healthcare professionals are saving lives, you know, we're superheroes. But, you know, like there were signs at a very early age that that's what I was drawn to. Yeah, I mean, you can even think about like your interests, your hobbies. You know, what do those things say about your own personal qualities? So there's different ways that you can sort of get in touch with those. But I would say definitely write them down. Like once you've kind of identified a few, then write them down so that it's more overt what they are.
And you can be more clear about it, and I think, like you said, being more clear on it then will help you when you are sort of, is this me or is this not me? Because you're like, well, this is what I've written down as what's me, therefore that doesn't fit, or this does fit.
Yeah. And because, you know, like like I said earlier, there's a lot of people kind of up and changing their lives, And that's cool. Honestly, that's totally cool. Like if I was like, I want to be an interior designer, and that's, what song my heart was singing at the moment, then that's kind of cool. Only if that's what my heart was singing. Like if I was like, time's too short and this COVID things is scaring me and I'm just taking a leap, it's probably not necessarily the right decision. If it's fear that's propelling it, maybe it's better to make those changes when you know what you really want for yourself and what's going to make you feel like you're going to belong in that world. Because I do also know of people who are changing jobs and stuff like that, and it's just because like it's really hard at the moment. COVID is really hard at the moment. And so I would hate for those people to look back and go, oh, I made the wrong choice because actually my workload was just really demanding during COVID, or I hated working from home during COVID, and those sorts of things. Yeah. But I mean, essentially you have to get down to the core of who you are, who you want to be, because if you are looking for evidence of disapproval from other people that you shouldn't be doing something, you're going to find it. It's like, that's what the data says, but also anecdotally, not everyone is going to be supporting you. And only when you do live your life do you find out who's there for you at the end of the day.
So true. Is it true that our brain is naturally wired to sort of pick out the negativity versus in regards to looking for disapproval over approval?
I think that if it's an anxiety-provoking situation, then probably. Yeah. Like if you are nervous about making that choice, you will find all the reasons to try to keep you safe. And I think that's that when I talk about anxiety with the people that I work with, I try to inform them that anxiety is just trying to keep you safe. But sometimes anxiety is doing a really, really good job. It's doing too much, though. Yeah.
So I guess to summarise, we want to really do that work on working out who we are and what we stand for, what our values are, to give us more security when we are trying to make different life choices or decisions, and to really have that strong sense of belonging.
Yeah, there's this really cool quote in Harry Potter, and I think it's Dumbledore that says it because he says all the profound stuff, but he said, if you're looking for universal popularity, you're not going to achieve that. And I really resonated with me as a teenager, because I was like, oh yes, even Dumbledore recognises that this is foolish what I'm trying to do. But it's true, right? Because I think that we're not meant to fit in all places. And we've all had experiences of being places where we felt so uncomfortable, and either we've hustled and pretended to be who we thought we needed to be in those situations, or we've just withdrawn and we've had a terrible time. Maya Angelou has this quote around, you belong everywhere and nowhere. And I think what she's trying to say with that quote is that when you truly have a sense of belonging, you could be absolutely nowhere in the world. You could be all by yourself and still have a sense of belonging. But that only comes with finding your crew. And you can only find your crew by being your authentic self. You can't pretend your way into belonging. That's clear from the data. It's clear from anecdotal life experience. And so essentially, when you have that sense of belonging, you could get invited to, for me, that would be the equivalent of a CEO private party, suit and tie event. That sounds terrible. I know that a lot of people would love that, but that sounds terrible. That would mean me being in a comfortable suit, pretending to be affluent and special and important. But if I have a sense of belonging, I could probably show up. I could probably fake it and cringe at myself the entire night, but know at the end of the day that I was just kind of doing that just to make it easier for me to get through that night. And so it doesn't really seem like I'm sacrificing myself. The danger is that if you don't have that sense of belonging, that you could show up in all your environments and be pretending. And actually have I think the shame of it, the true shame of it, is that you will never know how many people would actually still appreciate you for being your authentic self. Because I think that it shines through anyway. I think that people who really want to become your best friend or like have you in their life kind of get a glimpse of that. So why are you holding back from being who you truly are for the sake of your worry?
Wow, I think that's a great spot to leave it.
Your homework, crew, is to actually do that values exercise and just to try to figure out who you are. And even if you're pondering right now, once you park your car or finish your jog, write on a piece of paper and just spend some time mulling that over around how you enact those things and whether or not you could be braver and show up.
Yeah, definitely a valuable exercise to look at values. I think something that we probably don't do enough when, like you said, especially making big choices or decisions, and we're sort of, instead of just going off what people say, oh, maybe you'd be good at this or you should do that, versus really sort of working that out for ourselves. What aligns with us. If people have any more questions about this, or they want to know a little bit more, where can they find you?
Probably the easiest place is to find me on Instagram. You wouldn't believe it, that's probably the easiest place to find me. But my handle is BenjiTM, so BenjiTM.
Awesome, we'll add it in. Make sure you're following along at We Are Rise NZ on Instagram too, and subscribe at Rise Make Life Workout on YouTube. We'll see you next time.